And tomorrow's readings, if you've been following through reading the Bible, is in Habakkuk, which is 3 chapters long, and you'll be reading all 3 chapters. So I thought I'd kind of help you go through a little bit of Habakkuk today and explain a little bit about Habakkuk and what it's all about. First of all, the name Habakkuk means to wrestle or to embrace. And he certainly wrestled with important questions about the world and God's plan. And Habakkuk, he raised his questions before the Lord. Habakkuk was not afraid to ask God questions, and we should not be afraid to ask God questions. But be prepared when you ask the Lord a question, He might give you an answer, and you may or may not like it. So you need to be prepared for what you're going to hear or read or find. And so in this book we find what Habakkuk says, we find what he sees, we find what he sings, and we learn how to come to grips with the great questions of life. So I'm not going to read the verses. I'm going to let you read and look at the verses, but I'm going to give you reference to them as you are doing your readings tomorrow. Now here we are. We're listening to a dialogue between the prophet and the Lord. So he began with a very strong question in verse 2. How long, O Lord, will I call for help, and you will not hear? I cry out to you, violence, yet you do not save. Now, Habakkuk was wrestling with the double enigma of the divine providence of God. He wondered about the seeming inactivity of God. And I know there are times that you probably wonder about that, or you question and you wonder where God is and what's going on. And so he was wondering about that himself. So this isn't something new. People were sinning, and God didn't seem to be doing anything about it in his mind. So then he listed Judah's crimes and bemoaned the fact that wicked people seemed to prevail and that justice was just a joke in verses 3 and 4. I think we've got some of that going on today, that people are afraid that justice is just a joke and that wicked people are doing and acting any way they want. And so where is God in all this? I'm telling you where God is. He's still on His throne. He's still taking care of things, but we unfortunately live in a sinful world where craziness is going to happen. And so God accepted Habakkuk's question and told Habakkuk, look among the nations and just watch. Verse 5, he said, look among them and just watch. And then God described how He would be using the terrible Chaldeans or the Babylonians to punish His people for their sins in verses 6 through 11. Now, God's answer did not satisfy Habakkuk. In fact, it seemed to raise a bigger question about God's power and even His apparent inconsistency in verses 12 through 17. So here Habakkuk was saying, Lord, I don't understand the inactivity either. But now you tell me you're going to punish your own people with the people who are far worse than they are. What's going on here? Often we have questions like this because God's action seems to be inconsistent with what we know of His character. The first response in dealing with life's questions should be to take your honest questions to God. You know, God is not threatened by your honesty. Even our Savior on the cross said, why? Matthew 27 through 46. Why? Why is this happening? Now, second part is Habakkuk's tower. Notice what he sees in verses 1 through 20 of chapter 2. Next, Habakkuk built a watchtower so he could stand on the rampart and watch. Now, in those days, watchtowers would be built in the fields to help guard the crop. Habakkuk was saying that he wanted to get to a higher perspective. He would wait to hear what God had to say. So God told Habakkuk to write his message large so everyone could read it. Chapter 2, verse 2. Now in those days, public announcements would be written and displayed on clay tablets in the marketplace. We sure have come a long way from clay tablets in the marketplace, haven't we? God would answer Habakkuk's questions, and everyone would be able to read his answers. So God's first statement is that timing is everything. He may seem slow in acting, but keep waiting. because his timing is right on time. Chapter 2, verse 3. Timing is key because God is in charge. Now, we live between two great mountains. The first is the mountain of birth, and the last is the mountain of death. And in between, we live in the valley of time. God knows what he's doing. We just wait on him. Continuing through the rest of the chapter, we find 4 woe passages in which God highlighted sins that were characteristic of that culture and ours. Verse 9, covetousness. Verse 12, violence. Verse 15, seduction. Verse 19, idolatry. Folks, those sins are still just as real today. God was saying that in his perfect timing, he would deal with those problems. Then God said, "For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea." That is a lot of knowledge, folks. Chapter 2, verse 14. That is a prediction of Christ's second coming. God was saying, I'm coming, and I will solve all these problems. We need to wait on the Lord. So here's what I'm telling you. There are some problems in this world that are never going to be solved in this world because we live in a sinful world. But one day, God is going to return, and he's going to take his church home, and we are going to live in perfect unity forever and ever. So be patient. Wait on the Lord. So how do we live while we wait? We live by faith. This passage highlights 2 kinds of people in the world. The first kind trust in themselves. They depend on who they are and what they need to do to be saved. The just shall live by faith, chapter 2, verse 4. God was saying to Habakkuk and to us, it's a matter of trust. This verse is quoted 3 times in the New Testament. Romans chapter 1, verse 17. Galatians chapter 3, verse 11. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 38. Then God declared, "But the Lord is in his holy temple. Let all the earth keep silence before him." Verse 20 of Habakkuk 2. That's the third important response to life's questions. Although the thrones of this world topple and its temples collapse, God is still in control. No power, nation, or army, nothing on this earth can topple God from his kingdom. God is on his throne. Just keep on trusting him. Well, then he closes with Habakkuk's triumph, what he sings. Chapter 3, verse 1 through 19. We find in chapter 3 a changed man. Habakkuk has journeyed from sob to song, from gloom to glory, from question marks to exclamation points. He began this book in the valley and he ended it on the mountaintop. What changed? Not God, not Habakkuk's circumstances. Instead, Habakkuk learned to trust in the Lord, and he was getting ready to sing. Now I want you to notice the musical terms through the chapter. A prayer of Habakkuk the prophet on Shigionoth, chapter 3, verse 1. That is a musical term, by the way. And the last sentence of the chapter states, "To the chief musician with my stringed instruments," chapter 3, verse 19. That means to use this for congregational music accompanied by an orchestra. So, I'm sitting here thinking with Jason watching me do this, you've got work to do on the book of Habakkuk to try to figure out how to put that to music and your orchestra to play that for you. So anyway, that's what it means though. Dispersed 3 times in this chapter is the word Shelah. Chapter 3, verse 3. Chapter 3, verse 9, verse 13. That's also a musical term. It is a pause. Some believe it means think about that. This is a prayer song. Habakkuk was singing a prayer for revival to the Lord. That's the ultimate solution to it. All revival. God is the one who solves the problems of life. God is the one who solves the problems of our society. The government doesn't have the answers, but God does. Social programs don't have the answers, but God does. God can send revival. The next phrase speaks about God coming down in verse 3. The sentence that follows retraced the steps of the children of Israel in their wilderness journey. The emphasis is that all along the way, God came down, He was present. If God could do it in the past, He can do it today. God has not changed or lost His power. We ought to be praying for God to come down. We ought to be praying for God to send revival to America. This is also a praise song, chapter 3, verse 17 and 18. Look at how verses 17 and 18 are connected. Verse 17 begins with though, and verse 18 begins with yet. Habakkuk was saying, regardless of the circumstances, yet. No matter what happens, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. That's the fourth response to life's unanswered questions. In all circumstances, keep rejoicing in the Lord. Then Habakkuk concluded by affirming that God was his strength. Chapter 3, verse 19. Habakkuk didn't have all the answers, but he trusted in his mighty God who did. You know what? I don't have the answers. You don't have the answers. But God has the answers. And that's who we need to trust in. That's who we need to put our faith in. Well, thank you for listening today. And again, I hope that you will join us at either 9 o'clock or 10:30 on Sunday morning. If you cannot do that, I hope that you'll get on via the live stream and watch us in all those abilities and capabilities to do. And all the other things that are happening this week, our roundtable discussions, our Sunday school lessons, all the things that we do. You just need to check them out and check them out on the webpage and see what all places that you can go to see how God can help you in any way that you can. And God bless you. May you have a great day.